Hello, everyone, and welcome in. This is Aaron St. Dennis, the FF Mad Scientist, and welcome back to the Mad Science Lab podcast. Today, we are continuing on with Sleepers, Breakouts, and Busts, and here to help me with that is Drew Mezera. Drew, thanks for joining me. Always great to have you. You're on mute, Drew.
Wow. I have to act like I've been here before. My bad. I appreciate you having me on, though. It's always a pleasure.
Don't feel bad. Yesterday, I had talked to, it was a guest I had never had on before, and I talked to him before because he always goes by a pseudonym. So I had him, send me his real name, and I typed it in, looked at it, and then when I did it, I think I auto-corrected it, and it changed it from Brendan Booth to Brandon Boone, and I introduced him as Brandon Boone, and I was like, he's like, yeah, well, it's Brendan Booth, and I'm like, motherfucker, it is, and I just read it right up. I pulled the old Ron Burgundy, and I just said, whatever the screen told me is what I said, so, it happens to all of us, it happens, so, you want to take a second before we get into it and tell everyone where they can find you and your work?
Yeah, so you can find me at Twitter or on Twitter at DynastyDrewFF, and then you can also read some of my fantasy football articles at the FF League Winners. I just recently moved into my first ever apartment, and so the moving process has been taking a little while. I just got my internet set up like last week, I think it was. It was like last Friday, and I've been in here for almost a month now, so that was a pretty rough part, but should be getting back onto the grind of writing articles here shortly. So you should find this stuff there.
Don't feel bad. We had this discussion about management the other day. There are not a whole lot of people in the group writing, and I think we're thinning out the herd a bit. There's a whole lot of people who've been there a long time and haven't produced an article in a long, long time. So there's a couple of people there just to put it in their profile, I think. So
yeah, well, I can assure you that's not going to be the case. I'll be writing an article shortly.
You weren't the one we were discussing. You don't just spam the chat with your best ball questions.
Yeah.
you catch my drift. All right.
Yeah,
moving on. We will start with your sleeper. That is Chargers tight end Gerald Everett. Fantasy Pros has him projected as tight end 16. No rushing stats projected. 51.5 receptions for 524.7 receiving yards and 3.6 touchdowns. I have noticed a common theme with Fantasy Pros projections. They are on the what's the word I'm looking for? The safe side. They do not air things out, and they get pretty safe. So yeah. I would say a lot of these guys are floor plays. Why is Gerald Everett your sleeper?
Well, the biggest reason for me is I think that he showed a few flashy weeks last year, but with Kellen Moore coming over, I think that there's a lot of room for him to grow in the offense. We know Kellen Moore likes to pass it or have his quarterback pass it to the tight end. We have Dalton Schultz, who has 3 top 12 tight end finishes in a row. I think it was 12, then 3, then 11. That 3-year, I don't think we can see that from Gerald Everett. Maybe because not Dak Prescott, but Justin Herbert's a really good quarterback, but there's a lot of options there. I just think that he's a good guy at value to grab and then see. I mean, he could be a top 5 guy. We had Tyler Higbee as a top 5 guy last year, and I think that with the quarterback and the offense that they're going to be running this year, I think it's definitely worth the option.
Drew, completely off topic. You got kids?
I do not have kids.
You never get interrupted. This podcasting stuff. I have nothing all day. Nobody bothers me. I clicked record. We are under 5 minutes into it, and I was interrupted to see if he could buy something on Gorilla Tag. That was so important. He had to knock on the door in my podcast to spend $20 on a VR headset game. So
you're good.
All right. Good. I like what you had to say there, though, about Gerald Everett. I don't have the exact numbers on me. I'm going to look up his ADP. I should have already had this. But
I know it fluctuates between 14 and 16 to 17, I think, most of the time.
You know what? I've seen it even lower. Last time, I'm bringing it up right now, just one sec.
Okay, perfect.
Last time I had looked, he was down to 22, which is hilarious considering last year he finished. I have leagues where he was as low as 11, depending on format, and as high as 7. So
Right.
we will see. He is, where the hell is he? Lower. 19. So
Yeah.
19 right now, 155 overall. And like I said, he was, depending on your format, he was either a mid-range tight end 1 or a low-end tight end 1. Either way, he's going off the board as a mid to low-end tight end 2
And
behind, these,
I'd be
look at this
fine with
range.
I'd be fine with getting him as my tight end 1 if I'm punting, because really unless you have one of the top 3 or 4 tight ends, it's just it's a guessing game really. So to take him and hope for a high upside play week 1 and then maybe ship him off early if he has a good start to his season, there you go. But I think that that's a great buy for me at tight end
I
19.
have a lot of a lot of leagues this year where I missed on tight end. Tight end really went early and I didn't want to pay up. And I have a lot of leagues where I got to like the 11, 12, 13 round and I triple tap tight end and I went something like Dulcich, Higbee, Everett, and or Trey McBride. So I have a lot of teams with like 2 or 3 out of those 4 because they were basically all free. I think in Scott Fishbowl, I ended up with Dulcich, Everett, and Trey McBride in like rounds 14, 16, 17 or something like that. And they're just 3 of them. And I'm just hoping, I can stream one from week to week because like I love paying up for the tight ends, but if you didn't have an early, like a top 5 pick, you weren't getting Kelsey. The leagues where I did have a top 5 pick, I had a number 1 and I wasn't using it on Kelsey.
Nope.
Then it seemed like I always missed on Andrews. And then if I was at the turn, by the time it got back around to me, the next 3 were gone. And I just ended up saying screw it. And I went for the late ones.
Yeah, no, I really agree with that. Values of tight ends are just so tough. Like I'm out on Hawkinson at value right now. Pitts, I'm out on.
Me too.
Goddard, I'm out on. I've just like there's so many mouths to feed with a lot of these tight ends that, like you said, with like a Dulcich with Hamler and Tim Patrick being hurt. I mean, he could step up big. McBride's one of the few players in the offense. So I just think that there's a lot of better upside plays later than taking a safer guy like a Hawkinson, like a Goddard in the 4th, 5th round. So that's why I totally agree with you on that.
The first time it happened to me was Scott Fishbowl, and I was mortified by it. And then the more I've seen it, I'm like, you know what? I don't mind it. In the end, I was like, I kind of like this approach. And now I've just been, if the top 6 or 7 have fallen to me, I don't mind taking them, but I'm just not going out of my way this year for tight end. And I've just been grabbing a lot of that group. Like I said, I don't grab one of them. I end up grabbing 2, 3, 4 of them late. And I just stack them like they're going out of style. So
no, that's exactly what you have to do.
Your breakout is Green Bay receiver Christian Watson, projected as wide receiver 16. Rushing stat projection is 666, 66.6. 1 touchdown projected. Reception 69.5 for 955 and 6.1 receiving touchdowns. Why is he a breakout for you?
Well, we were just first off, I like always talking about floors, but I generally think that this is pretty high compared to consensus on Christian Watson for rankings. I think a lot of people are out on Christian Watson and they don't expect this type of volume. But then obviously I'll get into it. I think that there's a lot to love about this offense. I think that Jordan Love being behind Aaron Rodgers will definitely have helped him. I know he played in limited fashion in that Eagles game last year, but he looked pretty solid in that game, showed some poise against a really good Eagles defense. Christian Watson caught a touchdown from Jordan Love in that Eagles game. I think the domination of him in the red zone last year can continue. I think he had 9 touchdowns last year, and he was injured most of the season. If in my opinion, he's super talented, and if he were to flop, I think it'd be due to injury. I don't think it's due to his ability to play well consistently. I think that with LaFleur being the focal point of the offense, I think with Rodgers, if you remember the first year that LaFleur was the coach, him and Rodgers went back and forth on how they wanted to play. Rodgers likes a really slow tempo offense, and LaFleur actually likes a more fast pace, and he tried that early on, and Rodgers just was not having any of it. So I think we could see a faster pace of play for Love this year. So I think there's a lot to like for Christian Watson, but I know that he's a very polarizing player among the fantasy community.
He's interesting for me. Like, I like the potential. This range is just weird. Like, I think out of this range he's going, like it falls off for me after DK. I have DK at 15, and then Debo is where the cliff is for me. I think he easily has the highest ceiling of these guys, but he's by far the riskiest. I just think for me, this is a range where I'm probably, 36, 40, 50. This is where I've normally pivoted, and I'm trying to get the running backs that have fallen, Dobbins, Akers, Rashad White. I don't really own any of these guys here. I prefer to hammer running back here. And then I transition to wide receiver later and get Kirk, Ayuk, Dotson, Deontay, Lockett, people like that. So it's not necessarily that I don't like Watson. He's just in a range. I'm kind of a build specific. I have a general map where I like to zig and zag and go with the flow of the ADP. And this is normally the spot in the draft where I've gone away from but by now I've probably hammered 2 or 3 wide receivers in a row. And I'm going, okay, I don't really need to take a risky Christian Watson here. So what do you think about this spot in the ADP for him?
I think it's accurate. I feel exactly like you do. Once you get past DK Metcalf, you just got to shoot your shot. There's a lot of guys in a big group, and I think they're all valued pretty similarly. They're pretty close. But I think with the upside you could possibly have with Watson, another thing I want to bring up, shout out Kyle Lindemann. He told me, or he showed their schedules to start the year is really, really nice. They play 5 of their first 6 teams were bottom 6 defenses against the pass last year. So I think there could be a very good opportunity for him to start hot. I'm not big on Jaden Reed. I think they reached on him. And Romeo Doubs could be pretty good, but, they need 2 guys in the offense, and I don't think Luke Musgrave is going to be anything. So, but that's just off of my personal evaluation of the other players on the offense. Because you have people that think Doubs is going to be better than Watson.
I don't like Dobbs at all. I'm not high on either of the 2 tight ends. Jaden Reed's an interesting one. He was awesome on a shitty Michigan State offense. I definitely see the potential with Reed. I think he's more of a number 2. I think Watson's the number 1. Not. Love's the part for me that I haven't seen enough of Love to know what he is. He's like a Trey Lance. He could be awesome or he could be terrible. I don't know. I haven't seen enough where I can judge. And what have you, he's been in the league, 3 years?
3 years. They were going on his 4th year and he's only started 1 game.
What do you got? Yeah, you got 1 game of tape. So it's like Trey Lance, except with even less on film. So that's the part for me that I don't know how to judge is what Jordan Love is. Christian Watson himself, he's kind of the same. You don't really know what to make of him. He's really raw and like a great athlete, but is he gonna, is he refined enough to be a long-term play?
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot of questions. And I think if I am taking a receiver there, this is a range where you need to be drafting a safe receiver. And out of all the names on this list, he is not the one that screams safety. Every other one, except for maybe Ridley, is safe. He has the most upside, I think. I definitely think he has the lowest floor, though. So he's just probably not someone. Okay, Dynasty, I have a few shares, but in redraft, I'd probably I'd take Amari Cooper. I'd take Keenan Allen, D-Hop, DJ Moore. I'd just rather play it safe.
I like him. I think it depends on your build going into whatever round you're picking too, and he's available.
Well, that's what I mean. For the way I build in that range, I'm normally steering away from him or steering away from wide receiver. And if I am steering into wide receiver, it's because I need like a safe play.
Yeah,
and he's not a safe play. We will transition here to your bust. New York Jets running back Breece Hall. Projected as RB11, 992.4 rushing yards, 7.2 touchdowns, 41.4 receptions for 367.2 yards, and 2.3 receiving touchdowns after missing much of his rookie season. Why is he your bust?
I think there's a lot of reasons to not like him for redraft specifically. Speaking with Watson,
the Jets are telling you. Yeah.
What'd you say?
I said the Jets are telling you what those reasons are.
Yeah, I mean they're saying he's not going to be probably ready. They put him on the PUP to start the off season or start a camp, and they could bring him off of it, but they're also probably going to sign Dalvin Cook, or so he says. He says it's likely for them to sign him. We haven't seen anything yet, so maybe they won't. But I'm going to assume that they sign Dalvin Cook, and if they do, that completely shatters his upside. There's not much upside of a player coming off an ACL. We haven't seen anyone be top 5 coming off an ACL like at all that I can think of. We saw J.K. struggle last year. He kind of came into his own at the end of last year, but I think he's a great player. But for this year, I think I just want to fade him at ADP, especially when you have a guy that's coming off the same injury who might play week 1, and Javonte Williams is going 3 rounds later than him, or 3 or 4 rounds later, I'm pretty sure. So
there's a lot of reasons. The only one who produced is Adrian Peterson. He's the only one who did year 1 back. I don't think anybody else has.
Adrian Peterson, I remember that year after his ACL, he did really well.
That's it, though. That's the only one. Everybody else has been year 2 at if ever. So,
and it's not a good sign when you hear that they're on the pup to start camp and they're not possibly going to start week 1. You know, those are big red flags on players.
So I've been avoiding him for redraft just based on that. All along, I was assuming I think that he's either not going to be ready or he's going to follow a J.K. Dobbins scenario where he's out for a while and it takes a long time to really to ramp him up and he's not usable. So I just didn't think he was going to based on my own evaluation, I just didn't think he was going to be ready or useful enough to meet his ADP this year. And the fact that the team, all their actions basically tell you they agree, leads me to believe that I'm probably right in my assessment, and he's not going to be near running back 11, 28th overall. This is another spot, though, where, like I said, in this spot in the draft, end of the second round here, I'm not drafting a running back. This is probably where I'm drafting one of the high upside receivers. I'm taking, if it's Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Amon-Ra St. Brown, I'm not risking it on a Breece Hall, Tony Pollard, Ramondre Stevenson. I don't want any of these guys. This is where I do my zig to wide receiver. And if I do have to take one of these guys, it's probably not Breece Hall. I think he's the most talented. And if he was healthy, he's probably top 5 for me. But I don't think
top
he's
5
healthy.
For sure.
Have this conversation next year at this time, and he's probably top 5. But I don't think he's a great buy low in Dynasty if you can buy low, but sooner or later, we're going to hear that he's not going to be ready for a while. Unless they try and force him. They did that with JK last year, and he played
and Saquon got hurt 2 years ago. And, I mean, he came – I think it was an ankle injury. But before the ankle injury even happened, those first 3 or 4 weeks, if you remember, he looked rough to start the season in those first 3 or 4 weeks.
Week 1, I had him, and all I needed was 2 points. And he didn't get me 2 points, and I lost. I went into Monday Night Football going, it was a Monday night or 2, and I went in going, I need 2.1 from Saquon Barkley, my first-round pick. I took him 1 overall that year, 101. I'm like, I am golden. I think he put up 1.4 and left the game, and I was like, you son of a bitch.
Yeah, so. That's why, and like you were just saying, that was your first-round pick. With your first 2 or 3 round picks, you want a player with that can perform and doesn't have a lot of risk involved. Now, obviously, there's players every year that get hurt. In season, like Cooper Kupp was going to be a wide receiver 1, probably the wide receiver 1 overall if he didn't get hurt. But there's players that, you can see the red flags already, and there's no point in taking that risk when there's a lot safer, already proven players. So that's why I wouldn't take him even in the top 3 or maybe even, I don't even know if I'd take him if he slid to the 4th round probably.
See, and that's where I changed my policy recently, and I'll call it, and he's one of my favorite players, but I'll call it the Michael Thomas rule. I used to not care. I'd always buy the injury dip and say, I'll just stash him till week 9. And then I'd stash him and then he'd never play on my he'd never play and I'd waste it. I don't mind buying players. I'll buy the James Connors all day. The guys who are injury risks, but are healthy. The ones I'm not doing is I'm not drafting the players that are already hurt. Injury risk and already hurt, 2 different things. I'm not wasting a pick on a guy who I know is already hurt. Not doing it.
Well, we see players, we see it time and time again where players are hurt all throughout camp and they're like, they're gonna be okay. Like all the beer reporters are like, they'll be fine by season. Like look at Darren Waller.
J.K. Dobbins was fighting with reporters last year saying he was all right. He wasn't all right. He wasn't all right by week 18.
Yeah. So I just think, and I think that should be a golden rule for a lot of people, is to fade players that are hurt going into camp. Like it's not worth the added risk. Because the ceiling is way, way lower than the floor. Like the floor is just it's bottomed out if he gets hurt.
the years where last year I took a risk on Michael Thomas. It was like a 10th round pick. This is a late second, early third you're taking a risk on. Like, this could conceivably be your RB1, and you don't know. You could be without him for six weeks.
Yeah.
You don't know. There's just no way. I'm not. Go ahead.
If he stays on the pup, yeah, that's 6 weeks right there.
Yeah. I'm not touching him unless he falls. I'm not going to have him, but unless he falls outside of round like 6 or lower, and he's not going to, so I'm just not going to have him. So.
No, and it's just end of story. It's not worth the risk of injured players coming off ACL. I don't think I'll like Javonte. I think is at that point. Like, he's in the 6th round, isn't he? I mean, he's pretty low, and I think it's just weird.
He sounds like he's going to play week 2, is what it sounds like.
Yep, it's just weird that Javonte is so much lower, and it seems like he's closer to being recovered than Brees is, and the ADP is flip flopped in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know. Javonte just seems like I think his happened earlier in the season, right? Yeah,
the thing is that a lot of people thought that his was going to be worse because he tore his, I think it was ACL.
He tore everything.
He tore everything, and Brees's was supposed to be just a clean ACL tear, but it's looking like it might take a little bit longer than they expected.
But that's why I think Javonte's the value, is because his was so bad, people just wrote him off and assumed he isn't going to be ready. Right. Whereas Brees, everyone's giving Brees the benefit of the doubt that he will be ready, so it hasn't affected his ADP, and that's pretty dumb. So
yeah, I think Javonte went 7th round in my Scott Fishbowl draft. So
I don't even know. Let me try and bring mine up here before we close this out.
I guess this turned into a Buy Javonte Williams podcast today.
Yeah, it wasn't intended to be that way. I'm going to bring up, where the hell is it? Ugh, I hate trying to access anything during a podcast. It always makes your computer run slow. Okay, so green guys are running backs. Javonte Williams went in mine at the 8-8.
Yeah, see, and where'd Brees go?
4-6. So lower than he was going. But this was like, I got a murderer's row of my Scott Fishbowl. It's me and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 other guys that are either player profiler staff or associates. So
yeah, you had a lot of fun with that. You told me about it a little bit with the old Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase stack to start. So.
Yeah, to Cody Carpentier, the last person I'd want to give it to. So, all right. Well, before we close it out here, Drew, you want to tell everyone once again where they can find you and your work?
Yeah, Dynasty Drew FF on Twitter. I tweet sometimes when I'm not busy getting ready in my apartment. And you can also find the articles I've currently written and I will write in the future at the FF League Winners. And again, thank you, Aaron, for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
I choked on my water. Yeah, man. Thanks for joining me. It was great. It was a good chat. Apparently, we're higher on Javonte Williams than I thought, but that's good. I own him in Dynasty. So, all right. Well, this has been Sleepers, Breakouts, and Busts with Drew Mezera. Once again, I am Aaron St. Dennis, the FF Mad Scientist, and this has been the Mad Science Lab podcast. Thanks again, Drew, for joining me, and thank you all for tuning in. Take care and have a good night.